I stared at the bathroom scale in disbelief. Another 3 pounds gone this week. That made it 30 pounds in total over the past 4 months, despite eating normally. At 5'7", my once healthy 145-pound frame had shrunk to an alarming 115, and I hadn't changed a single thing about my lifestyle. "Sarah, the turkey's getting cold." My husband Jack's voice echoed up the stairs. It was Thanksgiving, and we were hosting his family this year, including his mother, Diana, who'd been making snide comments about my weight loss for weeks. I smoothed down my now loose dress and headed downstairs, plastering on a smile. The dining room was full of cheerful chatter and the smell of traditional holiday dishes. Diana sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, supervising everyone's movements. "There's our disappearing daughter-in-law," Diana announced loudly as I entered, looking thinner than ever. "What magazine gave you this ridiculous diet idea?" "I'm not on a diet," I said for what felt like the 100th time. "I've actually been trying to gain weight." "Of course you have." Diana rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She grabbed my plate and began piling it high with food. "That's why you're wasting away to nothing. You young girls are all the same, starving yourselves for attention." Jack shot me an apologetic look but said nothing. He'd grown up with Diana's domineering personality and still struggled to stand up to her. "Mom, Sarah's been to the doctor about this," he tried weakly. "Oh, doctor shopping now, are we?" Diana scoffed. "In my day, we didn't need doctors to tell us to eat properly. We just did it." I pushed the food around my plate, fighting waves of nausea. The truth was, I'd been to 3 different doctors in the past month. Each one had run basic tests, found nothing obvious, and suggested it might be stress or anxiety. But something felt deeply wrong in my body, and nobody seemed to be taking it seriously. "Sarah, dear," Diana's voice cut through my thoughts, "do you know what eating disorders do to your chances of giving me grandchildren?" The table fell silent. My sister-in-law Jessica looked mortified, while Jack's father suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. "I don't have an eating disorder," I said firmly, setting down my fork. "And my reproductive plans aren't your business." "Everything about my son's life is my business," Diana snapped, including his wife's attention-seeking behaviors. First, it was those mystery symptoms last year, then the allergies that conveniently appeared when I cooked, and now this dramatic weight loss. "There's always something with you, isn't there?" "Mom, that's enough." Jack finally intervened, but the damage was done. I excused myself to the bathroom, where the nausea finally won. As I knelt on the cold tile floor, I heard Diana's voice carrying through the walls. "See, probably making herself throw up right now. Classic attention-seeking behavior." The following week, the persistent abdominal pain that had been my companion for months became unbearable. Jack found me curled up on our bedroom floor, unable to stand straight. "That's it," he said, helping me up. "We're going to the ER. No more waiting." The emergency room doctor listened to my symptoms with a frown that deepened as I described the weight loss, pain, and nausea. Unlike the other doctors, she ordered a CT scan immediately. "There's a mass," she said quietly, showing us the images. "A significant one. We need to do more tests, but this explains the weight loss and pain." Jack's hand tightened around mine as the doctor continued explaining. Words like oncology and biopsy floated through the air, each one making the room feel smaller. When the final diagnosis came a few days later, I insisted Jack call his mother to come to the hospital. Diana arrived in her usual flurry of self-importance, probably expecting another dramatic episode she could dismiss. The oncologist, Dr. Chen, was reviewing my scans when Diana burst in. "What attention-seeking drama are we dealing with now?" she started, but her voice trailed off as she saw the serious expressions in the room. "Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Chen addressed Diana directly, "I'm showing these scans because Sarah wanted you to understand. This mass here," she pointed to the screen, "is a rare type of gastrointestinal tumor. It's been growing for months, possibly longer, interfering with nutrient absorption and causing the significant weight loss you've been attributing to attention-seeking behavior." Diana's face went pale as the doctor continued explaining the aggressive treatment plan we'd need to start immediately. The fork she'd been using to eat her lunch from a hospital cafeteria clattered to the floor. But she's too young," Diana stammered. She was just being dramatic about dieting. No, Mrs. Thompson. Dr. Chen's voice was firm. Your daughter-in-law has been very ill, trying to tell everyone something was wrong. The question now is, are you ready to listen and support her through what comes next? I watched as Diana sank into the nearest chair, her perfectly maintained facade crumbling as the truth of her behavior over the past months hit her. Jack stood beside me, his hand steady on my shoulder, as we waited to see how his mother would handle the reality that her attention-seeking daughter-in-law had actually been fighting for her life all along. The first round of chemotherapy began 3 days after the diagnosis. Diana, still reeling from her misconceptions being shattered, appeared at the hospital carrying a large bag filled with organic snacks and ginger tea. For the nausea, she said awkwardly, hovering by the door of my treatment room. I did some research. It was the first time I ever seen her uncertain about anything. The usually commanding woman who'd spent months belittling my symptoms now seemed lost, watching as nurses connected tubes to my port. You can sit down, I offered, gesturing to the chair beside me. Jack had gone to get coffee, and the silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. Diana perched on the edge of the chair, fiddling with her designer purse. I keep thinking about Thanksgiving, she finally said. About all the things I said. You mean about me starving myself for attention? The words came out sharper than I intended, but months of dismissal and criticism had left their mark. She flinched. Sarah, do you know what it felt like? I continued, the words pouring out as the chemotherapy drugs began flowing into my veins. To have something wrong with your body, to be terrified, and have your mother-in-law tell everyone you're just being dramatic. Tears filled Diana's eyes, her carefully applied mascara threatening to run. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. When Dr. Chen showed those scans, she paused, taking a shaky breath. I've never been wrong before. At least I never admitted to being wrong. That's an understatement, I muttered. My friend Patricia, Diana continued, her daughter-in-law actually did have an eating disorder. She used illness claims to hide it. I assumed. You assumed I was like her, I finished, without ever really listening to me. The machine beside us beeped, marking the progress of my treatment. Diana watched it with frightened eyes, perhaps finally realizing the seriousness of what she dismissed for so long. Jack returned with coffee, stopping short when he saw us talking. Over the next hour, he watched in amazement as his mother, who had never served anyone in her life, adjusted my blankets, offered me ice chips, and held a basin when the nausea hit. The following weeks brought more changes. Diana attended every chemotherapy session, armed with new research and questions for the doctors. She joined online support groups for families dealing with gastrointestinal tumors and, surprisingly, started a journal documenting my symptoms and responses to treatment. Mom's gone full nurse mode, Jack commented one evening after she'd left our house stocked with prepared meals and cleaning supplies. I've never seen her like this. She's overcompensating, I said, too tired to sugarcoat it. She feels guilty. As she should, he replied, helping me to bed. The chemotherapy was taking its toll, making me weaker than I'd ever been. The turning point in my relationship with Diana came during my 6th treatment session. I was particularly sick that day, the side effects hitting harder than usual. I can't do this anymore, I sobbed as another wave of nausea hit. It's too much. Instead of her usual push to stay positive or offering practical solutions, Diana simply held my hand. You can be done if you want to be, she said softly. This is your battle, Sarah. We'll support whatever you decide. I looked at her in surprise. This wasn't the controlling mother-in-law I knew. But you've been so invested in the treatment plan. Because I'm trying to fix my mistake, she admitted. I spent months telling you how to feel, dismissing your experience. I won't do that anymore. This is your journey. That moment marked a shift in our dynamic. Diana stopped trying to manage my illness and started actually supporting me through it. She learned to listen when I described symptoms instead of jumping to conclusions. When other relatives suggested I was being negative for discussing my struggles, she surprisingly became my defender. Sarah isn't being negative, I overheard her telling my aunt-in-law on the phone. She's being honest about her experience, and we're going to respect that. During a particularly rough night when Jack had to work late, Diana stayed with me. As I lay on the bathroom floor, too weak to move after being sick, she sat beside me, gently stroking my back. I keep thinking, she said quietly, about all the signs I ignored. The weight loss, the pain, the fatigue. You were asking for help in every way you could, and I was too busy judging to hear you. I turned my head to look at her. Why did you always assume the worst about me? Diana was quiet for a moment. Control, she finally answered. If I could blame your symptoms on attention seeking, I could control the situation. The reality, that you were seriously ill, that was something I couldn't control. And I'm not good with things I can't control. 6 months into treatment, Dr. Chen called us in to review my latest scans. Diana insisted on being there, clutching her symptom journal like a lifeline. The tumor had shrunk significantly, but the victory came with a cost. My body was ravaged by the aggressive treatment, weighing even less than when we started. The good news is the tumor is responding, Dr. Chen explained. But we need to discuss long-term recovery plans. Diana's hand shot up like a student in class, but she caught herself, looking at me first. Sorry, old habits. This is your appointment, Sarah. I smiled weakly. Go ahead. As Diana discussed nutrition plans with Dr. Chen, I noticed how different she was from the woman who berated me at Thanksgiving. Her designer outfits had been replaced by comfortable clothes suitable for long hospital stays. Her perfectly manicured nails were now practical and short. She transformed from a controlling mother-in-law into something resembling a real mother. I have a suggestion, Diana said on the drive home. But I want you to feel free to say no. She took a deep breath. Would you consider staying with us during your recovery? The guest house has been empty since Dad renovated it, and it would give you privacy but keep you close to help. I glanced at Jack, who looked as surprised as I felt. Diana's guest house was her pride and joy, usually reserved for her elite social circle. You don't have to answer now, she added quickly. Just think about it. 2 weeks later, we moved into the guest house. To everyone's shock, Diana had completely renovated it for my needs, installing handrails, stocking the kitchen with appropriate foods, even creating a peaceful garden space for my recovery. The garden was Mom's idea, Jack told me one evening. She researched healing gardens, actually hired a specialist in therapeutic landscaping. The biggest surprise came during a family dinner, when Diana's sister Margaret started making comments about my appearance. Still so thin, Margaret clucked. Maybe if you made more of an effort to eat normally. Actually, Diana interrupted, her voice sharp. Sarah's weight is a direct result of her battle with cancer, which she's fighting with incredible strength. If you can't be supportive, Margaret, perhaps you should skip these dinners. The table fell silent. Diana had never publicly contradicted her sister before. Margaret sputtered, I was just trying to help. No, Diana cut in. You were doing exactly what I used to do, making judgments without understanding. I was wrong then, and you're wrong now. Later that night, I found Diana in the garden, tending to the herbs she planted for my tea. Thank you, I said, for standing up to Margaret. I should have done it sooner. With everyone who ever doubted you. She patted the bench beside her. You know, I spent years being the family matriarch, thinking I knew best about everything. It took almost losing you to realize how little I actually knew. As my strength gradually returned, Diana's transformation continued. She became an advocate in the local cancer support community, specifically focusing on young patients whose symptoms had been dismissed. She started a support group for mothers-in-law of cancer patients, helping other women avoid the mistakes she'd made. 1 year after my diagnosis, I was strong enough to host Thanksgiving again. This time, Diana worked alongside me in the kitchen, following my lead. Remember last year? She asked, chopping vegetables. I was so horrible to you at this very table. You've changed since then, I replied. Because you taught me something valuable, she said, putting down her knife. You taught me that being strong isn't about controlling everything and everyone. Sometimes it's about admitting you're wrong and learning to listen. The dinner table that year looked very different. Instead of Diana at the head of the table, we all sat in a circle. When Margaret started to comment about someone's cooking, Diana shot her a warning look, and she quickly changed the subject. During dessert, Diana clinked her glass for attention. I want to say something. She turned to me. Sarah, a year ago, I was the worst kind of mother-in-law. I was cruel when you needed kindness, dismissive when you needed support. But you gave me a chance to learn and change, even after everything I'd done. You didn't just survive cancer, you helped me become a better person. There wasn't a dry eye at the table as she continued. So this Thanksgiving, I'm grateful for second chances. I'm grateful for doctors who prove mothers-in-law wrong. And most of all, I'm grateful for a daughter-in-law who showed me that real strength isn't about being right, it's about being there for each other. Jack squeezed my hand under the table as I looked around at our transformed family. The tumor had changed more than just my body. It had rebuilt relationships I thought were permanently broken, teaching us all that sometimes the hardest battles bring unexpected healing. Diana caught my eye across the table and smiled, not her old, controlling smile, but a new one, full of understanding and genuine love. We had both survived this year, emerging stronger not despite our struggles, but because of them. Children will ruin the atmosphere, Marcus said, adjusting his silk tie while studying his reflection in our bedroom mirror. This is an important networking event, Emma. My colleagues expect sophistication, not screaming kids running around the garden. I stood in the doorway, watching my husband of 12 years transform into someone I barely recognized. Ever since his promotion to senior partner at the law firm, he'd become increasingly obsessed with appearances, fitting into the right social circles. But this was a new low, even for him. They're your children, Marcus. Jack is 7, and Sophie just turned 5. Where exactly do you expect them to go during your precious garden party? He turned to face me, his expression a mix of condescension and impatience. I've already arranged for your sister to take them for the weekend. The party starts at 4. They need to be gone by 2. My name is Emma Mitchell, and at 35, I never imagined I'd be standing in my own home, listening to my husband explain why our children weren't good enough for his social circle. Our beautiful Victorian house in Maple Grove Estates had always been a source of pride, its sprawling garden the envy of the neighborhood. Now Marcus was turning it into a stage for his social climbing ambitions, with no room for the people who should matter most. The kids have been excited about this party for weeks, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Sophie even picked out a special dress. She wants to show everyone her butterfly catching skills. Marcus sighed, the sound dripping with theatrical exhaustion. Emma, please. The Hendersons are coming. Judge Matthews and his wife too. This isn't some backyard barbecue, it's a sophisticated garden soiree. Children simply don't fit the ambience I'm trying to create. I watched him adjust his tie one last time, remembering how different he used to be. When we first moved to Maple Grove 5 years ago, we'd host neighborhood picnics in our garden. Jack and Sophie would run around with the other kids while Marcus grilled burgers and laughed at their antics. Now, he was too concerned with impressing his colleagues to remember what really mattered. Fine, I said, my voice cool. I'll tell them they're spending a weekend with Aunt Lisa. But Marcus, don't expect me to help you host. If our children aren't welcome in their own home, neither am I. He barely looked up from his phone. Actually, that might be best. You've been stressed lately. Take the weekend off with the kids. I've got this covered. The casual dismissal stung, but I refused to let him see how much. Instead, I went to find our children, dreading the conversation ahead. I found them in the garden, Jack helping Sophie practice her butterfly catching technique with a little net we'd bought her for her birthday. Mommy, look. Sophie called out, her pink dress already showing grass stains. I almost caught one. Can I show everyone at Daddy's party? My heart clenched. Actually, sweetie, I have an idea. How about we have our own special weekend? Aunt Lisa said we could stay with her, and you know what that means. Cousin Emma's treehouse. Jack exclaimed, momentarily distracted from his disappointment. But then his face fell. But what about the party? Dad said we could help set up the fairy lights. I pulled them both close, breathing in Sophie's strawberry shampoo and Jack's lingering scent of outdoor adventures. Sometimes grown-ups make silly decisions, I said carefully. But I promise you, we're going to have an amazing weekend. Better than any boring old garden party. As I helped them pack their overnight bags, an idea began to form. Marcus wasn't the only one with connections in Maple Grove Estates. As head of the Neighborhood Children's Committee, I'd spent years organizing events and building relationships. If he wanted to exclude our children from their own home, fine. But he wasn't the only one who could throw a party. I made 3 calls while the kids finished packing. The first was to Lisa, confirming we could use her massive backyard. The second was to Maria Garcia, head of the HOA Social Committee and mother of 3. The third was to Tom Anderson, who owned the local party supply company and had always complained about Marcus's stuck-up attitude. A neighborhood carnival? Maria's voice crackled with excitement over the phone. Emma, that's brilliant. The families here have been saying we need more kid-friendly events. I can have approval from the board within an hour. Tom was equally enthusiastic. I've got bounce houses, cotton candy machines, everything you need. Consider it my contribution. That husband of yours has been looking down his nose at my business for years. By the time we pulled out of our driveway, Marcus was already directing the catering staff on the proper placement of his imported French furniture. He barely noticed us leave, too busy creating his perfect, sophisticated atmosphere. What he didn't know was that his perfect garden party was about to get some serious competition. Where are we really going, Mom? Jack asked from the backseat, always the perceptive one. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror and smiled. We're going to show this neighborhood what a real party looks like, sweetheart. How do you feel about carnivals? Their excited cheers filled the car as we drove away, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Marcus could have his sophisticated soiree. But in excluding our children from their own home, he'd given me the push I needed to stop accepting his increasingly elitist behavior. What he didn't know, what he was too busy impressing Judge Matthews to notice, was that the HOA had been looking for an excuse to start regular family-friendly events in the neighborhood. His garden party wasn't just going to compete with a carnival. It was going to compete with the launch of a new Maple Grove tradition. I glanced back at my children, now chattering excitedly about cotton candy and bounce houses, and felt a smile spread across my face. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about creating something better than what excluded you in the first place. The weekend was about to get very interesting in Maple Grove Estates. Lisa's sprawling backyard was already buzzing with activity by Saturday morning. Tom's crew had arrived at dawn, setting up 3 bounce houses, a cotton candy station, and enough carnival games to rival a county fair. I watched as Sophie's eyes grew wide when they unfolded a massive inflatable slide, while Jack could barely contain his excitement at the sight of the rock climbing wall. Emma, this is absolutely brilliant, Lisa said, handing me a coffee as we supervised the setup. Half the neighborhood has already RSVP'd to Maria. The Hendersons too. Apparently, they chose our carnival over Marcus's party. Something about wanting their twins to have fun for a change. I nearly choked on my coffee. The Hendersons were Marcus's most sought-after guests, the ones he'd been trying to impress for months. Are you serious? Oh yes, Lisa grinned. Sarah Henderson called Maria personally. Said she's tired of pretentious, adult-only events. She wants her kids to grow up in a real community. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Where are the Hendersons? They just canceled, claiming another event. Did you have something to do with this? I ignored the message and focused on the transformation happening before me. The local face-painting artist had arrived, setting up her station under a striped tent. The scent of popcorn filled the air as Tom's team tested the machines. Parents from the neighborhood started showing up early, offering to help with the setup. Mrs. Mitchell. I turned to see Jenny Thompson, the quiet girl from Jack's class, running toward us. Mom says we're having a real carnival. Can I help with the butterfly garden? The butterfly garden had been Sophie's idea. When she couldn't show off her catching skills at Marcus's party, we decided to create a special area with flowering plants to attract butterflies. The local nursery had donated dozens of butterfly-friendly flowers, and now children were carefully arranging them in a beautiful pattern. Of course you can, sweetie, I said with a smile, watching her join the other kids. This was what a real community looked like, children and adults working together, creating something special. By early afternoon, the carnival was taking shape. Maria had organized a volunteer schedule, with parents taking turns running different stations. The Henderson twins arrived early, immediately joining Jack at the rock climbing wall. Their mother, Sarah, found me by the cotton candy machine. Emma, this is exactly what Maple Grove needed, she said warmly. When we moved here, we worried it would be all stuffy garden parties and forced sophistication. This, she gestured at the joyful chaos around us. This is real. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Marcus, each one more frantic than the last. Judge Matthews just canceled too. What's going on? Emma, answer me. Why is everyone talking about some carnival? This is completely unprofessional. You're undermining my career. I turned my phone off and joined Sophie at the butterfly garden. She was in her element, teaching younger children how to attract butterflies with sugar water. Her special dress, the one she wanted to wear to Marcus's party, was now adorned with face-painted butterflies to match her garden. "Look, Mommy," she called out, holding up her butterfly net as a monarch landed perfectly on the rim. "I caught one, and I get to show everyone." The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the carnival as more families arrived. The bounce houses were full of laughing children, parents chatted while kids got their faces painted, and the cotton candy machine worked overtime. Even some of the older residents who usually complained about noise were enjoying themselves. Mrs. Peterson, the notorious HOA complainer, was teaching children how to make origami butterflies at a craft table. "Emma," Maria called out, hurrying over with her tablet. "You won't believe this. The HOA board just voted. They want to make this a monthly event. They're calling it Community Family Fun Day, and they want you to head the organizing committee." I was stunned. The HOA was notoriously strict about events, usually preferring Marcus's type of sophisticated gatherings. "Are you serious? What about noise complaints?" Maria laughed. "Look around. Even the usual complainers are having fun." Plus, she lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Between you and me, they're not too happy with Marcus trying to turn the neighborhood into some exclusive country club. This is exactly the kind of community spirit they want to encourage." As if to prove her point, I spotted Judge Matthew's grandchildren racing down the inflatable slide, their usually stoic grandfather cheering them on. He caught my eye and gave me a warm smile and a thumbs up. The butterfly garden had become the heart of the carnival. Children gathered there between activities, learning about nature from Sophie and her newfound confidence. Jack had organized a junior rock climbing competition, complete with safety demonstrations for the younger kids. They weren't just having fun. They were building connections, learning leadership skills, becoming part of something bigger. Around 4 p.m., the time Marcus's garden party was supposed to start, Lisa pulled me aside. "You should see what's happening at your house," she said, showing me her phone. One of the neighbors had sent her a photo of our backyard, set up with Marcus's imported furniture and sophisticated decorations, completely empty except for the catering staff and a handful of his colleagues from the firm. "The caterers are Instagramming about it," Lisa snickered. "They're calling it the party that wasn't. Apparently, it's becoming a bit of a local joke." I should have felt satisfied, maybe even vindicated, but instead, I felt a twinge of sadness. Marcus had become so focused on appearances that he'd lost sight of what really mattered. The sound of children's laughter, the joy of community, the real connections that make life meaningful, he was missing all of it. "Mrs. Mitchell." Jenny's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Can you help us? We want to make thank you cards for everyone who helped with the carnival." I joined the growing group of children at the craft table, watching as they created colorful cards decorated with butterflies and carnival themes. This was the real sophistication Marcus had been chasing, the natural grace of children showing gratitude, the authentic connections being formed, the true spirit of community. My phone lit up with one final message from Marcus before I turned it off again. "This is humiliating. We need to talk when you get home." Yes, I thought, watching Sophie teach a group of children her butterfly catching technique, we certainly did need to talk. But first, we had a carnival to enjoy and a community to celebrate. The sun was setting over Maple Grove Estates, casting long shadows across Lisa's backyard, but nobody was ready to leave. Parents set up picnic blankets, children continued their adventures, and the butterfly garden glowed with the solar lights we'd installed that morning. This wasn't just a reaction to Marcus's exclusion anymore. It had become something much more important. It had become a beginning. The text came just as I was leaving my mother's funeral. My hands were still shaking from placing the final rose on her casket when my phone buzzed with Marcus's message. "Don't bother coming home. Change the locks. Emma needs the space." Emma, his 24-year-old yoga instructor. The woman he'd been just friends with for months while my mother was dying of cancer. And now, on the day I buried my mom, he was kicking me out of my own home. I stared at my phone, reading the message again through tears that had nothing to do with grief. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 35, I was watching my life crumble in real time. First, my mother's death after a brutal 8-month battle with cancer, And now this, my husband of 12 years choosing the day of her funeral to show his true colors. Another message buzzed through. Your stuff is in storage unit 47 at Safekeep. Take your time getting it. Emma and I will be christening every room of our new home tonight. My Aunt Sarah touched my arm gently, noticing my distress. Liv, what's wrong? I showed her the messages, watching her face transform from concern to fury. That bastard, she hissed, gripping my phone so tight I thought it might crack. He's kicking you out? Today of all days. I nodded, feeling strangely calm despite everything. Maybe I was in shock, or maybe I'd just run out of tears. He changed the locks while I was burying Mom. What Marcus didn't know, what he'd never bothered to learn during our marriage, was that the house wasn't just any property. It was my inheritance, left to me by my grandfather 5 years ago. The same grandfather who'd raised me after my father died, who'd taught me about real estate and the importance of protecting what was mine. Don't put his name on the deed. Grandpa had warned me when Marcus and I got married. I've seen too many good people lose everything because they trusted the wrong person. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. Now, standing in a cemetery where we just laid my mother to rest, I was grateful for his foresight. I dialed Mr. Thompson, my grandfather's old lawyer who still handled all my legal affairs. He answered on the second ring. Olivia, I'm so sorry about your mother. How are you holding up? Marcus changed the locks on my house, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He's moving his girlfriend in. There was a pause, then a low chuckle that held no humor. The house your grandfather left you, the one that's solely in your name. That's the one. Give me an hour, he said, his tone shifting from sympathetic to businesslike. Don't respond to any more of his messages. Don't go to the house. Let him dig his hole deeper. I ended the call and turned to my Aunt Sarah, who was still seething beside me. Can I stay with you tonight? Of course, sweetheart, as long as you need. She squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? I looked at my phone as another message came through, this one with a photo of Emma sprawled across my mother's antique couch. The one she'd left me in her was just last week. The rage that filled me was ice cold and clarifying. I'm going to let Marcus learn a very expensive lesson about checking property records before making stupid decisions. The next few hours passed in a blur. Sarah drove us back to her house, where I changed out of my funeral dress into jeans and a sweater. Mr. Thompson called back with a game plan, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction I hadn't heard before. I've contacted the police, he said. They'll meet us at the house tomorrow morning. What Marcus has done is illegal, changing locks and attempting to take possession of property he has no right to. The fact that he did it while you were at your mother's funeral, well, let's just say the judge isn't going to look kindly on that. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Marcus, each one more arrogant than the last. Emma loves what I've done with the master bedroom. Your taste was always so boring. And later, don't worry about the garden. Emma's going to dig up those roses your mom planted. She wants to put in a meditation space. Each message was carefully screenshotted and forwarded to Mr. Thompson, evidence of Marcus's intentions, his casual cruelty, his complete disregard for my property rights. I didn't respond to any of them, though my fingers itched to tell him exactly what was coming. That evening, curled up on Sarah's couch with a cup of tea, I found myself looking through old photos on my phone. Marcus and I, on our wedding day, both smiling, both so young. Had he always been this person? This selfish, this cruel? Or had it happened gradually, so slowly I hadn't noticed until it was too late? You know what your mom would say right now? Sarah said, sitting down beside me. She'd say, sometimes people show you exactly who they are. Believe them the first time. I smiled, remembering Mom's wisdom, her strength. She'd never really liked Marcus, though she'd been too kind to say it outright. Maybe she'd seen something in him that I'd been too blind to notice. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, I said, putting my phone away. Marcus has no idea what's coming. Sarah grinned, a fierce expression that reminded me so much of Mom it hurt. Want me to come with you? I'd love to see his face when he realizes what he's done. I nodded, feeling stronger than I had all day. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, I had family by my side and the law on my side. Marcus thought he'd won, thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash and take what was mine. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. The next morning dawned bright and cold. I had barely slept, but adrenaline coursed through my veins as Sarah, and I pulled up to my house. 2 police cars were already waiting, along with Mr. Thompson's sleek black sedan. Marcus's new Tesla was in the driveway, parked in the exact spot where Mom used to park when she came to visit. The sight of it made my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral as I stepped out of the car. "Mrs. Parker," Officer Reynolds greeted me, his face professional but sympathetic. "Mr. Thompson has briefed us on the situation. Are you ready to proceed?" I nodded, straightening my spine. "More than ready." Mr. Thompson approached, carrying a thick folder. "I have all the documentation here, the deed, property tax records, your grandfather's will. There's no question about ownership." He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. "Shall we?" Officer Reynolds knocked firmly on the door. We could hear music playing inside, laughter, the sounds of my life being overwritten by strangers. The door opened, and there stood Emma in what appeared to be one of my silk robes, her face falling when she saw the police. "Can I help you?" she asked, trying to sound confident, but her voice wavered slightly. "Is Marcus Wilson here?" Officer Reynolds asked. "We need to speak with both of you." "Babe, who is it?" Marcus's voice called from inside. He appeared behind Emma, shirtless, looking like he owned the place. His smug expression froze when he saw me standing between 2 police officers. "What's going on?" he demanded, pushing past Emma to stand in the doorway. "Olivia, what are you doing? I told you not to come back." Mr. Thompson stepped forward. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Richard Thompson, Mrs. Parker's attorney. I'm here to inform you that you're currently illegally occupying property that belongs solely to my client. You have exactly 1 hour to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises." Marcus's face reddened. "This is my house. I've been living here for years. You can't just—" "Actually," I interrupted, my voice steady. "It's not your house. It never was. Check the deed, Marcus. I told you to do that yesterday, remember?" Mr. Thompson held out the property records. "The house was inherited by Mrs. Parker from her grandfather 5 years ago. Your name isn't on any of the documentation. By changing the locks and attempting to take possession, you've committed several crimes, including criminal trespassing and attempted theft." Emma's face had gone pale. "Marcus, you said this was your house." "You said." "It is my house," Marcus shouted, his cool facade cracking. "I'm her husband. Everything she has is mine." Officer Reynolds stepped forward. "Sir, that's not how property law works. You need to start gathering your belongings now, or we'll have to escort you out as is." I looked past them into my house, and felt my heart clench. In just 1 day, they'd managed to create chaos. Empty wine bottles littered the coffee table. Mom's antique vase was knocked over, dirt spilled across the hardwood floors she had loved so much. And there, in the corner, was a pile of framed photos, my family photos, face down on the floor. 1 hour, I said, my voice cold. "And Emma, that's my robe you're wearing. Take it off." The next 60 minutes were excruciating. Marcus alternated between pleading and threatening as he threw clothes into bags. Emma darted around like a scared rabbit, gathering her things while trying to avoid everyone's eyes. "You can't do this to me," Marcus kept saying. "Where am I supposed to go? Emma's lease is up. We were going to live here." "You should have thought about that before you changed the locks while I was at my mother's funeral," I replied calmly. Each time he started to argue, I held up my phone, showing the messages he had sent. "Would you like me to read these out loud? The ones where you bragged about christening my house?" Sarah stood beside me, her presence a solid comfort as we watched them pack. She had been taking photos of the damage they caused, the scratched floors, the stained carpets, the broken pieces of my life they carelessly tossed aside. "You'll be receiving a bill for the damages," Mr. Thompson informed Marcus. "I suggest you pay it promptly if you want to avoid additional legal complications." Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Marcus and Emma stood on the front lawn with their hastily packed bags. The neighbors had begun to gather, watching the scene unfold with poorly concealed interest. "You'll regret this," Marcus spat, his handsome face twisted with rage. "You think you've won. I'll sue you for everything you have." I stepped closer to him, close enough to smell the expensive cologne I had given him for Christmas last year. "No, Marcus, you won't. Because if you try, I'll make sure everyone sees these messages. I'll make sure they know you kicked your wife out of her own house while she was burying her mother. How do you think that will look to your clients?" to your precious country club friends." He flinched, and in that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time, not as my husband, not as the man I had loved for 12 years, but as a coward who had thought he could take what wasn't his. "And Marcus," I added, watching him pause by his Tesla, "the car payments come from my account. You might want to look into that too." As they drove away, Emma crying in the passenger seat, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The house was a mess, but it was mine. Every broken item, every stain, every scratch was just evidence of who Marcus really was. Officer Reynolds approached with his notepad. "Would you like to press charges, Mrs. Parker?" What they did, especially the timing of it, could be considered criminal. I thought about it for a moment, looking at my beautiful home, thinking of my mom, my grandfather, everything they had worked to protect. "Yes," I said firmly. "Yes, I would." Sarah squeezed my hand. "Mom would be so proud of you right now." As the police began documenting the damage, I walked through each room, taking in the chaos Marcus and Emma had created in just one day. In the master bedroom, they had thrown my clothes into garbage bags. In the kitchen, they had already replaced my coffee maker with Emma's fancy espresso machine. And in the garden, I stopped cold. The roses, Mom's roses, they had actually started digging them up. Standing there, looking at the uprooted plants my mother had tenderly cared for, something hardened inside me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about honoring the people who had loved me, who had protected me, who had taught me to stand up for myself. Marcus thought the story was over. He thought he had lost the house and that would be the end of it. He had no idea what was coming next. In the weeks that followed, Marcus learned exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose. The criminal charges for trespassing and property damage were just the beginning. Once word got out about what he'd done, kicking his wife out during her mother's funeral, his carefully crafted social image crumbled. The country club, where he'd spent every Saturday networking with clients, quietly revoked his membership. His law firm, which prided itself on family values, placed him on indefinite leave pending an ethics review. Emma disappeared to Bali, posting vague Instagram quotes about toxic relationships and learning to trust again. She quickly figured out that Marcus wasn't the wealthy divorcee he pretended to be. But the real blow came when Marcus discovered just how much of his lifestyle had been funded by my accounts. The Tesla was repossessed. His credit cards, all linked to my stellar credit history, were canceled. The monthly payments to his investment accounts stopped. "He's trying to negotiate," Mr. Thompson told me during one of our meetings. "Says he'll drop all claims to the house if you'll agree to support him financially for 6 months while he gets back on his feet." I almost laughed. And I told him he's lucky we're not suing him for emotional distress. The judge was particularly interested in the photos of your mother's damaged roses. Those roses, I'd spent days carefully replanting them, nursing them back to health. Each one felt like a small victory, a way of honoring Mom's memory while erasing the damage Marcus had tried to cause. One morning, about a month after everything happened, I was having coffee on my porch when a familiar Tesla pulled up. Marcus stepped out, looking thinner, his designer clothes replaced by department store basics. "Olivia," he called out, staying by the car as if uncertain of his welcome. "Can we talk?" I sipped my coffee, thinking of all the times I'd forgiven him, all the times I'd let him smooth talk his way out of consequences. "No, Marcus, we can't." "Please," he stepped forward, his voice taking on that wheedling tone I'd once found charming. "I made a mistake. I see that now. Emma was nothing, just a midlife crisis. You're my wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "The divorce was finalized yesterday. Didn't your lawyer tell you?" He paled. But we were supposed to have a hearing." "You waived your right to a hearing when you failed to respond to the court summons. Check your mail sometimes, Marcus. Those legal notices weren't junk." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing but now just seemed pathetic. "What am I supposed to do? I've lost everything." "No," I stood up, finally ready to say what I should have said years ago. "You threw everything away. There's a difference." Just then, Sarah pulled up in her car. She'd been coming over every morning, helping me restore the garden, making sure I wasn't alone. She took one look at Marcus and pulled out her phone. "Should I call Officer Reynolds?" she asked loudly. He said to report any trespassing immediately. Marcus backed away quickly, almost tripping over his own feet. "I'm leaving. I needed." "What you need," I said firmly, "is to get in your car and drive away. Don't come back, Marcus. Don't call. Don't text. It's over." As his car disappeared down the street, Sarah came to stand beside me. "You okay?" I looked around at my home, really looked at it. The roses were blooming again, their pink petals bright against the morning sun. Through the window, I could see Mom's antique vase, restored and filled with fresh flowers. The house felt peaceful, clean, like it had been cleansed of something toxic. "You know what?" I smiled at my aunt. "I really am." 6 months later, I was hosting a garden party. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered to celebrate the complete restoration of Mom's rose garden. Mr. Thompson came raising a toast to justice served with thorns. Even some of Marcus's former friends showed up, having chosen sides definitively after seeing his true colors. I heard through the grapevine that Marcus had moved back in with his parents in Ohio. Emma was engaged to a yoga instructor in Bali. Their brief attempt to steal my life had become nothing more than a cautionary tale, a reminder to trust my instincts and stand my ground. Standing in my garden, surrounded by people who truly cared about me, I felt my mom's presence strongly. She would have loved this: the flowers blooming, the laughter, the sense of family and community. More than that, she would have been proud of how I'd handled everything. "Your mother always said you were stronger than you knew," Sarah said, coming to stand beside me. Guess she was right. I touched one of the roses gently, its petals soft against my fingers. She usually was. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the garden, but I wasn't afraid of shadows anymore. Sometimes the darkest moments in our lives lead us to the brightest futures. We just have to be brave enough to stand our ground and fight for what's ours. Marcus had thought he could take everything from me on the day I was most vulnerable. Instead, he'd given me something priceless: the knowledge that I was stronger than any storm, capable of not just surviving but thriving. And those roses, they bloomed more beautifully than ever that year. "Could you step out for a moment, Olivia? There's something important I need to announce." Marcus's voice carried across our beautifully decorated living room, cutting through the cheerful chatter of our anniversary celebration. 50 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me, including those of our 12-year-old twins, Emily and Noah. I stood frozen by the fireplace, champagne glass halfway to my lips, trying to process what my husband of 15 years had just said. The same husband who had insisted on throwing this lavish anniversary party, who had spent weeks planning every detail, down to the gold-trimmed invitations and crystal centerpieces. "Marcus?" I managed my voice steadier than I felt. "What do you mean?" He straightened his designer tie, the one I'd given him that morning, and flashed that confident smile I'd once fallen in love with. "It'll just take a minute, honey. Wait in the kitchen." The kitchen. As if I were the hired help instead of his wife of 15 years, the mother of his children, the woman who had supported him through law school by working 2 jobs. I caught sight of his secretary, Amanda, standing in the corner. She was wearing a red dress that seemed inappropriately tight for an anniversary party, twisting a strand of perfectly highlighted hair around her finger. The smirk on her face told me everything I needed to know. My hands should have been shaking. My voice should have cracked. But 15 years of marriage had taught me to read the signs, and I'd been preparing for this moment longer than Marcus knew. "Actually," I said, setting down my champagne glass with deliberate care, "I think I'll stay right here." Marcus's jaw tightened, the same way it did when a legal argument wasn't going his way. "Olivia, don't make this difficult." Emily stepped forward, her face pinched with worry. "Dad, what's going on?" "Nothing, sweetheart," Marcus replied smoothly. "Your mom just needs to give me a moment with our guests." Our guests. My parents were there, looking confused and concerned. Marcus's entire law firm had shown up, along with half our neighborhood. Even our old college friends had flown in, supposedly to celebrate our milestone anniversary. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him. The silver threading through his dark hair, which I used to find distinguished, now seemed calculated, like everything else about him. He'd been at the gym more often lately, coming home late smelling of unfamiliar cologne. I'd noticed the charges for jewelry I never received, dinners at restaurants I'd never visited. "If you have something to announce at our anniversary party," I said clearly, "I think your wife should be here to hear it." Amanda stepped forward, her red dress catching the light. "Marcus, honey, maybe we should wait." The word honey hung in the air like a slap. Noah's face crumpled as understanding dawned. He was always the more sensitive of the twins, picking up on emotional undercurrents that Emily sometimes missed. No, I said, my smile growing wider. Please, Marcus, make your announcement, then I'll make mine. He faltered for a moment, thrown by my composure. This wasn't how he'd scripted this moment. I was supposed to slink away quietly, letting him control the narrative like he always did. But something in my expression must have unsettled him because he ran a hand through his carefully styled hair. Olivia, I'm trying to be considerate here. Considerate? I laughed, the sound ringing true and clear. Is that what you call asking your wife to leave her own anniversary party so you can announce your engagement to your secretary? Please, Marcus, enlighten us all about your consideration. The room went deadly quiet. I could hear ice clinking in glasses, the soft gasp of shocked guests, the muffled sob from Emily, who had finally caught up to what was happening. Amanda's smirk faltered. Clearly, this wasn't going according to their plan. They'd probably imagined a dignified announcement, sympathetic murmurs from the guests, a seamless transition from one life to the next. Marcus's face darkened. If you insist on doing this here. Oh, I insist. I turned to face our guests, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. My husband has something to share with all of you. And after he's done, I have my own announcement to make. One that I think everyone, especially Marcus's law partners, will find very interesting. His eyes narrowed. He knew I handled all our family finances, that I had access to every account, every transaction, every paper trail he thought he covered. But he couldn't know what else I'd discovered, not yet. Mom? Emily's voice wavered. What's going on? I reached for both my children, drawing them close. They were old enough to understand betrayal, but too young to deserve it. It's okay, sweethearts. Sometimes people show us exactly who they are. We just have to be ready when they do. Marcus stepped forward, his confidence visibly shaken. Olivia, think about what you're doing. Oh, I have, I replied softly. I've thought about it for months. Now, would you like to make your announcement, or should I make mine first? The crystal chandelier light caught the diamond on Amanda's left hand, the one I tracked to a purchase at Tiffany's 3 weeks ago. The same day Marcus had told me he needed to cut back on the twins' extracurricular activities because money was tight. I smiled, feeling the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. The floor is yours, honey. Marcus stood there, his perfect facade cracking under the weight of 50 expectant stares. For a man who commanded courtrooms with ease, he suddenly looked like a defendant caught in a lie. Since my wife insists on making a scene, he began, shooting me a look that once would have made me shrink away. I might as well be honest. Amanda and I have fallen in love. These things happen. We're getting married as soon as the divorce is finalized. The collective gasp from our guests would have been comical if it weren't for the twins trembling against me. Emily had gone rigid, while Noah pressed his face into my side, trying to hide his tears. These things happen. I repeated, my voice cutting through the murmurs. Like the thing that happened to our joint accounts 3 months ago, or the thing that happened to the twins' college fund last week. Marcus's face paled. Amanda stepped forward, probably to support him, but my glare stopped her cold. I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus said, but his lawyer instincts were kicking in. He knew he was walking into something, but he couldn't see the trap yet. I gently disentangled myself from the twins, kissing each of their foreheads. Mom, Dad. I called to my parents. Could you take Emily and Noah into the kitchen for a moment? I think they'd appreciate some of those chocolate cupcakes we made earlier. My mother immediately understood, wrapping her arms around her grandchildren and guiding them away from the impending explosion. My father followed, but not before giving Marcus a look that promised this wasn't over. Once the kids were safely out of earshot, I turned to our guests. I apologize for what's about to happen, but since my husband chose to make this public, I think everyone deserves the whole truth. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, holding it up like a prosecutor presenting evidence. 3 months ago, I noticed some unusual transfers from our accounts. Large sums moving through shell companies, eventually landing in offshore accounts. At first, I thought we'd been hacked. Marcus's attempt at nonchalance wasn't quite working. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his law partners exchanged glances. Being the devoted wife I was, I hired a forensic accountant. Imagine my surprise when the trail led right back to my husband's office. more specifically to cases he'd settled over the past year. Amanda's smirk had completely vanished. She took a small step away from Marcus, her survival instincts apparently kicking in. "Olivia," Marcus warned, but I wasn't stopping. "It seems my husband has been settling cases for far less than his clients deserved, then receiving generous consulting fees from the opposing parties. Very creative accounting, really the kind that would interest the Bar Association." One of Marcus's partners, David, stepped forward. "Marcus, is this true?" "She's lying," Marcus snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's just bitter about Amanda." I pulled out my phone, opened an email, and handed it to David. "These are transfers from the Anderson case last month, the one where that poor family accepted a settlement that barely covered their medical bills. 2 days later, a shell company linked to the defendant's corporation paid my husband $300,000 for consulting services." David's face darkened as he scrolled through the evidence. The other partners gathered around, their expressions shifting from confusion to anger. "There's more," I continued. "Last week, Marcus emptied the twins' college fund. He probably thought I wouldn't notice right away since he left a few thousand as cover. That money went straight to a down payment on a penthouse apartment. I'm guessing that's where you've been playing house with Amanda." Amanda's face flushed. "I didn't know about any of this," she protested quickly. "Marcus told me he was separated, that everything was above board." "Oh, save it." I cut her off. "Those Tiffany receipts have your signature as a witness. You've been helping him hide evidence for months." Marcus finally snapped. "You had no right to investigate me. Those were private business matters." "Private?" I laughed. "Like this anniversary party was private? You wanted an audience, Marcus. Well, now you have one." I turned to his law partners. "I've already sent copies of everything to the managing partners and the Bar Association. I would have handled this privately, but my husband insisted on making announcements today." The room erupted in chaos. David was on his phone, probably calling the other partners. Amanda had backed herself into a corner, suddenly looking much younger and less confident. Our neighbors and friends whispered furiously, phones out, undoubtedly spreading the news across our social circle. "You've ruined everything," Marcus hissed, stepping close to me. "I would have taken care of you and the kids, made sure you were comfortable." "Comfortable?" I stepped closer, meeting his gaze. "Like when you told the twins they couldn't go to summer camp because money was tight while you were buying Amanda that tennis bracelet. Or when you said we needed to cut back on Emily's piano lessons the same week you put a deposit on your love nest." His face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, David interrupted. "Marcus, we need to talk. Now, the managing partners are calling an emergency meeting." I smiled sweetly. "You should go, honey. Sounds important." As Marcus was led away by his increasingly angry partners, I walked to the kitchen to check on my children. They were sitting at the counter, picking at chocolate cupcakes while my parents hovered protectively nearby. "Mom?" Emily looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Are we going to be okay?" I wrapped my arms around both my children, breathing in their familiar sense. "We're going to be better than okay. We're going to be honest with each other, and that's worth more than anything your father could have given us." Noah wiped his eyes. "But what about the penthouse he bought? And Amanda?" "Oh, sweetheart," I kissed his forehead. "Your father's about to learn that actions have consequences. And thanks to Grandma and Grandpa, who helped me set up trust accounts for both of you last year, your college funds are safe. The money your father took, that was from a dummy account I set up when I first got suspicious." My mother squeezed my shoulder. "I always said you were smarter than him." Through the kitchen door, we could hear the party breaking up, voices raised in argument, car doors slamming. Someone was crying, probably Amanda, realizing her fairy tale was actually a cautionary tale. I hugged my children closer. This wasn't how I'd planned to spend my 15th anniversary, but maybe it was the gift we all needed. The truth finally laid bare, and the chance to build something stronger from the ashes of my husband's betrayal. My father cleared his throat. "The house is in your name, isn't it?" I nodded. Another thing Marcus never bothered to read carefully when we bought it. He was too busy looking successful to notice who actually owned what. Emily looked up at me with fresh tears. "Did Dad ever really love us?" That question broke my heart more than any of Marcus's betrayals. "Your father loves you," I said carefully. "He just loves himself more. But you have me, and I love you enough for both parents. Sometimes that's more than enough. 1 month after the anniversary party that ended my marriage, I sat in my home office reviewing emails from Marcus's former law firm. The fallout had been swift and devastating for him. The managing partners had placed him on immediate leave pending investigation. Amanda had disappeared to her parents' house in Ohio, taking with her copies of every incriminating document she could find in a desperate attempt to save herself. Marcus's carefully constructed world crumbled faster than the elaborate anniversary cake he'd insisted on ordering. My phone buzzed with a text from David, now the lead partner handling the mess Marcus left behind. Bar Association made their decision. License suspended pending criminal investigation. Thought you should know. I didn't get the satisfaction I'd expected. Instead, I felt a quiet peace. The twins were at school, adapting better than I feared. Emily had thrown herself into piano with renewed passion, and Noah had joined the school newspaper, discovering a talent for writing that surprised us all. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. My mother stood there, holding a stack of papers. The last of the divorce papers just arrived. Your father's friend at the DA's office says they're building a strong case. I nodded, taking the papers. How are you holding up? I know this isn't what you imagined for your daughter. She sat down beside me, taking my hand. I'm proud of you. You protected yourself and your children. That's all any mother wants. Did you see the article in the local paper? I asked, pulling up the headline on my laptop. Prominent attorney faces fraud charges. Ex-wife credited with uncovering scheme. They're calling you a whistleblower, my mother said, smiling. Though I prefer protective mama bear. Just then, my phone buzzed again. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, his first contact attempt in weeks. I answered, putting it on speaker. Olivia. His voice was rough, defeated. They're saying 5 to 7 years. The plea deal. I need your help. No, Marcus, I replied calmly. You need a good lawyer. I hear they're expensive these days. The twins need their father. They needed their father when you were stealing their college fund. They needed their father when you were lying to their faces. Now, they need to see that actions have consequences. He tried a different approach. I'll tell them you manipulated the evidence, that you set me up. Goodbye, Marcus. I cut him off, ending the call. My mother squeezed my hand. Later that afternoon, I picked up the twins from school. Emily was clutching sheet music for a new piece she was learning, and Noah had a draft of his first newspaper article. Mom, Emily said as we drove home, Amanda came by school today. She wanted to talk to us. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What happened? I told her to leave. Noah spoke up, his voice firm. I said if she wanted to talk, she could do it through our lawyer. Just like you taught us. Pride swelled in my chest. That was exactly right, sweetheart. She looked different, Emily added. Not so shiny anymore. She said she was sorry, that she didn't know about the money stuff. Sometimes people only show remorse when they're caught, I explained, pulling into our driveway. That doesn't make it genuine. Inside, the house felt different now. Gone were Marcus's pretentious art pieces and the formal furniture he'd insisted we needed to impress his clients. Instead, there were family photos, comfortable couches, and the twins' art projects proudly displayed. Can we get pizza tonight? Noah asked, settling at the kitchen counter with his homework. The kind Dad said was too cheap for our image. I laughed, reaching for the takeout menu. Extra cheese and pepperoni coming up. As we sat round the kitchen table later, eating pizza and helping Noah edit his article, my phone buzzed with an email from Marcus's firm. They were offering a generous settlement to avoid public litigation, including full college funds for both twins. Mom? Emily asked, noticing my expression. Is everything okay? I looked at my children, really looked at them. They were stronger than before, more honest, more resilient. We all were. Everything is perfect, sweetheart. Sometimes the best anniversaries aren't about celebrating the past. They're about building a better future. Noah raised his pizza slice. To Mom, the best whistleblower ever. To Mom, Emily echoed, who taught us that standing up for yourself isn't just right, it's necessary. I raised my own slice, feeling tears prick my eyes. To us, because sometimes the best family isn't the biggest, the richest, or the most perfect looking. It's the one that sticks together and tells the truth. As we finished our dinner, Laughing and planning our weekend, I realized something important. The anniversary party that was supposed to humiliate me had instead set us free. Marcus had wanted to make an announcement that would destroy our family. Instead, he'd given us the chance to build a stronger one from the ashes of his betrayal. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better.